This is the first DVD of Liang-style Bagua concepts. We'll be covering Dingshi Bagua Zhang, which is fixed posture Bagua. Bagua is a martial art that was created in the late 1800s. It was founded by Deng Haichuan, who had studied Lohan boxing, and mixed that with Taoist meditation practice, which involved walking in a circle. So it's a unique martial art that relies on circle walking as the basic practice. And everything in it derives from walking in a circle to create spiraling energy. There are many styles of Bagua. The three most prominent are the Liang style, the Chung style, and the Yin style. So the Liang style actually contains elements of the other two styles. Since Liang Zhenpu studied with the founder very late, he actually studied with his other disciples who created their own versions. And that will, for those of you who know Bagua, that'll come across very clearly as you'll probably see techniques that are familiar to you. Dingshi Bagua, this fixed posture Bagua or fixed pattern Bagua, uses patterns or set postures, fixed postures actually, of the upper body while the lower body walks in a circle with a twisting force. It is this practice that is the foundation of all the things that come later in Bagua. And without sufficient development in this, it's very difficult to do the more quote-unquote advanced level techniques. In some sense, Dingshi is the most basic level. In some sense, at the most advanced level, you return to Dingshi and discover that all the other techniques are contained within it. The founder of Bagua, Deng Haichuan, was fond of saying, training in martial arts is not as good as walking the circle. So by that he meant that the foundation of the footwork created by the circle walking, the body posture that it gives you, the body connection, the power that it develops, is more important than specific techniques. And I hope that we'll see in this DVD that you can create endless techniques from even one posture. So why circle walking in a fixed posture? It develops several things. One, it develops rooting, so that with every step, you're rooted in the ground. In this case, we're talking about a moving root, so that in motion, the body is connected to the ground like a tree. And this is a famous statement in Bagua, to move like the wind and stand like a nail. Conveys that image. Secondly, it develops what we call connection, which is not a concept unique to Bagua. Many martial arts talk about body connection. This is connecting both the lower body through the waist to the upper body so that you have a unified body action and you can develop the so-called whole body power. Secondly, body connection in this case involves creating spirals that run through the entire body so that when the legs create a spiral, it transmits through the torso into the arms to offset the opponent's force, or to absorb the opponent's force and take it down into the ground so that it doesn't break our structure. And we can therefore upset their structure. So although all martial arts to some degree use circular principles and spirals, Bagua's unique use of it stems from the footwork and the so-called mud step, which we'll talk about shortly. The founder of Bagua Zhang, Deng Haichuan, who taught many of the people who created styles that we know today as Bagua, the most famous probably being the Chung style, second to that the Yin style. This is the Liang style, which is in some ways a blend of those two styles through Liang Zhenpu, who was a student of both the founder and Chen Tinghua and Yin Fu. It blends principles of those styles. The key to all the styles is the step. And the founder said repeatedly, training in martial arts is not as good as walking in a circle. 10,000 techniques are not as good as simply walking. So the walking is the way we set up all the techniques in Bagua. It's an art that relies on mobility and footwork to achieve its ends, and most of the techniques will not work properly without the mobility and footwork. There are about 10 postures that we'll look at, or 10 body patterns. There are, of course, more than these, and different Bagua styles employ different ones or different variations of the same one. In the Liang Zhenpu method, of course, most teachers show 8 because that's standard. But in fact, with different teachers in this family of systems, I've seen variations. So we will do some of the variation. We'll do 10 postures. It's important that when we we look at the words Dingshi and they mean fixed posture, we understand that the fixed posture is for training. In actuality, they're moving postures. They're moments of potential energy that you're engaging, and you pass through from one to the other in moments in time. And that's going to become very apparent when we do applications, because you'll see that it's usually, although a posture, we may be using one single posture as the main one, we're employing pieces of other postures, or the actual technique is occurring in a moment where we're passing from one posture to the other. So in terms of the moving root, I'm going to demonstrate that in a second, but let me say that although there are probably infinite postures one could hold and walk Dingshi, and if you look at the many styles of Bagua, you'll see different sets of 8 postures. Usually, most styles teach a basic set of 8. I've learned from different teachers in the Liang system, and some use different postures. So we'll look at 10 that are representative, but realize that postures are just transitions between moves. So you could theoretically have 100 different postures. These are the key ones because they elucidate a lot of the techniques that are going to come later. In terms of stepping with Bagua, we want to have this idea of a moving root. Now many martial arts use stances like Mabu or Gongbu to develop their rooting, and they have various stance forms to develop that. In Bagua we use this basic stepping, which is called Tangnibu, or mud stepping. Some people translate it as mud wading step. It's similar to if my foot was in the mud and I had to pull it out without losing my shoe. I would have to pick my foot up slowly and extract it and set my foot down carefully so that I don't slip. So in terms of a simple forward step with the mud stepping, the foot lifts as a whole off the floor and it steps out flat. The weight comes down. So you can already see that in this transition I've moved through what some martial arts would call a cat stance, or in Chinese martial arts they call the empty step, where the heel is up or it's just lightly touching the floor, to a middle level step similar to Santi Shi in Xingyi, or a back stance in Japanese martial arts, which could be longer if I take a longer step. And then it transitions to a forward stance or a bow and arrow stance. And then from there, the foot picks up again, and another step is taken. The alignments of the step are very particular. So the first thing is the head is erect. This keeps the spine, and the upper back is lifting the head upward. To prevent me lifting too far, the chin needs to be tucked inward, and the chest needs to be soft. If I soften the chest, the shoulders naturally round so that I have a slightly convex back. The hips sit. So this is called sitting the qua. The qua is this area in the front side of the hip, what we call the inguinal groove. So you're sitting down in the hips. The knees are bent. When the foot steps out, it's completely level with the floor. As it lands, the whole foot lands. And this point on the bottom of the foot, Yongquan or kidney 1, has a feeling of lifting. So it's not that I'm gripping the floor like a claw. It's more that as I settle the foot and I sink the tail and erect the head upward, the foot itself feels like a suction cup that grips the floor all around that central point. When we pick up the rear foot, we try not to show the heel. So there's one of these statements in Bagua, never show the heel to your opponent, which really means that the nature of the step is if I lift my heel, I'm already falling forward. If I pick up the whole foot simultaneously, I can maintain this root with the tail under and the head erect, and I'm rooted all the way through the step. Setting the foot down without bringing the weight. So rather than landing this way or stepping out with the heel first, which might, on uneven ground, I might slip or roll on a rock or slip on a wet surface. I'm also vulnerable to sweeps if I step like that. Instead, by putting the foot out with no weight on it, landing it with no weight on it, if it's swept, if it's kicked, it can move. And then when I'm ready to move, the weight comes. So we'll just look at one more step with it. And we can turn the other way. Okay, you can also see on the transition the foot brushes the other ankle, which is going to have implications for kicking or evading kicks. So what does this do internally? Most of us think the hip begins where we feel our hips, or the leg begins where we feel our hips. In fact, the psoas muscle, which is the major hip flexor muscle, begins at the lumbar spine, and it attaches to the femur. So in fact, in a sense, the leg begins at the lumbar spine. And what this stepping tries to achieve, or what it does achieve, is this connection of the lumbar spine to the legs, so that I'm not using my leg muscles to drive the step. Instead, by tucking the tail, pushing this point in the lower back out, called Mingmen, which is about the L2, L3, lumbar vertebra 2 or 3. And you can usually feel it as you tuck your tail. That point automatically pushes out. By using that, you create a lifting force in the body. You create a connection of the legs to the back so that the leg muscles can relax. By tucking the tail, the perineum lifts, and that brings the energy up, the chi, the energy up the spine to the top of the head. And as you step down, the chi naturally settles back down to the lower body and into the floor. So this creates a force that moves through the body, that rolls through the body, that both generates power outward and roots us at the same time. So I'll bring out, just to show some of the ways this connects the body. Very simple. If I'm being pushed, I want to let the whole body be pushed. So if he pushes me and I reach back with my foot, he can just move in on me and take me back, right? He take me off my heels this way. If I root the body down and use the mud stepping going in a backward direction, I've been hard. He just moves back my root. And if he runs forward, I can run backward. The same token, if I want to push him, if I try and push this way, he can just step back and I'm falling into my stance. If I move with a moving root, I can take him backwards very easily. So let's look at this step now. We've talked about some details. Let's look at it in a circular stepping pattern, which is really what we're going to be doing with it. The basic pattern that we usually start people with when they're learning is just what I did before, to walk in a straight line. Simply because it's easier not to have to add the rotational forces. But that quickly progresses to walking in a circle. So generally, for starting practice, a circle that takes you 8 to 12 steps is better than a very small circle to start. And we're going to use the same pattern, but now the body's going to rotate in. So this is actually the first posture, the downward pressing palm. The arms reach down as the head stretches upward. Now once we add the circular element, it's very particular how one has to turn. The outside foot does this hooking step, kobu, or some people call it a toe in, although it's more properly a hook step. The inside foot does a baibu, or swing step, which means as the heel reaches the heel of the planted foot, the foot starts to swing outward on the circle. On a large circle, it's going to look like you almost walk straight ahead. So the saying is the outside foot curves, the inside foot walks straight, meaning straight on the circle. And the body twists to look to the left. So we let the circle and the idea of hooking the feet create a spiral that twists the upper torso. At the same time, the tail has to sink, the Mingmen has to push backward. Otherwise, I end up arched like this, and I'm off balance. This way, I maintain the alignment of the lower back, which keeps the upper body in connection with the lower body. So Baibu or swing step, Kobu or hook step. The simple way to change direction is just to Kobu or hook step all the way in. So we almost come to this pigeon-toed stance. The other foot swings and becomes a hook step. So it starts as a swing step, but as we stride out, it becomes a hook step going in the other direction. And as you step, the body slowly rotates to turn to the right. In the beginning, it should be slow, even, steady, without the body swaying. Okay, so what does this mean in terms of martial arts? If Aaron comes out, just on a simple level, in a straight line, without even rotating, just on a simple idea, if he comes in with a fairly hard push, right, he wants to uproot me, so he pushes, just come in faster with the push. Yeah. He wants to uproot me. This is his intention. If I let myself get rocked back on the heels, that's what's going to happen. If instead as he pushes, I just use the idea of sinking the tail and walking back, I'm basically using a retreating mud step. By the same token, if I go to push Aaron and he steps out of the way, a lot of times this is what's going to happen if I just step in and push. But if I use the idea of the mud stepping, even if we meet like this, it's just a moving root that takes his space. So once, a little bit slower, once I engage with him and I'm moving my root, it's very easy to just keep that rolling, almost like you're pushing a baby carriage and trying to keep it very steady. Even if Aaron steps out of the way, even if he tries to fold it, my hand, like pull away from me. My hands are still here. I don't get caught, pull away again. I don't get caught in this dynamic where now he can easily strike me. Right? So that's one aspect of it. By turning, we create other things. On a simple grab, for example, just by walking the step. So I'm starting to walk my circle. I can lead him into the space I vacated. Even if he lets go as I start to move, it still brings me to his flank by one step. So one of the statements about Bagua, I think also attributed to Deng Hai Chuan, is with a single step you can face the 8 directions, right? Rather than having to turn around to face somebody, same idea, if he's on my back, rather than try one hand and set up a punch, right? Rather than trying to turn and walking straight into that fist, the idea is, well, I turn by walking. And in one walk, one step, I can see all these directions. With one step, I can see all the other directions. And it's a more efficient way to turn around. So by the same token, in terms of the leading, that's one aspect. Another thing is if we use one of the other postures, this is the millstone pushing posture, we can use this step to cut the line. Right? So that as we engage at the moment of impact or the moment of engagement, I'm stepping and using that to create a flanking movement, right? It also serves the purpose of, as he presses, I'm rotating him. By rotating myself on that circle, I can rotate his body. And the whole idea in Bagua that there's a whole set of poems about the strategies in Bagua. One of the most common things that is said in those over and over again is that you want to get next to the opponent, as though you're standing alongside of him. So it's this step that allows us to do that. Some people have a misconception when they see you walk the circle that somehow you're running around the opponent. That's not what we're doing at all. Instead, in one step, you're to the side. In 2 steps, I'm to the back. So with the downward pressing palm, all I have to do is walk backwards. All right? So the second thing we want to think about is things that are common in other martial arts, the use of a wedging force, the use of leading the energy. the use of minor rotations of the arm, right? So that we have, my waist is rotating, but also this is rotating. So in a simple thing where we go from a kind of embracing move, which we'll be doing later, or it could be a meeting hand, and he's coming in with force, I'm just rotating, right? As I rotate my leg, my knee, my hip, my torso, the whole, my spine, my arm rotates simultaneously, and that creates the turning force. Right? Similarly, I'm creating a wedge. So if I'm like this, it's not simply two hands pushing straight. There's a convergence of forces. And this can be done in many ways. You can actually make a wedge. You can make an offset wedge. Or you can have this kind of technique or this kind of technique, which are also wedging in against the opponent. So if I get in here, I'm creating a wedge that cuts his spine. Right? In the same way that if he punches with a hook, I'm creating a wedging force that gets me in, or if he comes on a straight punch, I'm wedging in here, right? My both hands create a triangle force that goes straight to the center line of his body. In Bagua, sometimes you see it done this way, where you're turning him like this, right? So the structure of the body has to maintain its integrity. If he's pushing, again, his push, rather than push upward a little bit, rather than taking me this way, if I sit down, I sit the qua, I root down in the foot, and I rotate, it merely puts the force down into the ground. And he roots me even more while he uproots himself. So he had to take that fast step. Okay, so these are just a few ideas. They're not unique to Bagua. What is maybe unique to Bagua is the method of using them with the stepping. So we're going to look now at how to walk the circle with the different postures. Very simple, with a very simple direction change. We already discussed a little bit the downward pressing posture. Again, for my hands to press down and maintain the alignment, my head has to erect up toward the ceiling. That means the upper back and head are reaching upward while the tailbone is sinking downward. And that allows my elbows to stretch downward. So a common mistake as the arms get tired is for people to raise up this way, and then you're not downward pressing, you're actually upward lifting. So you want to make sure that as you walk, the arms sink down. Some styles call this fierce tiger descends the mountain, which has the implication that all four limbs are touching the ground. And inside the body, it can actually feel like that. So to change direction, kobu. Again, the direction change, kobu, hook step. The hands stay still. Step out. This now, the right foot now becomes a hook step, and walk the other way. And we'll assume the second posture, the embrace posture. So like holding something in your arms or embracing it, if you hold too loose, it drops. If you hold too tight, you crush it. So you hold it gently, as though you're embracing with the whole body. Again, to change direction, toe in. The arms stay still, and the body walks the other way. A variant of the embrace posture is this offset embrace that's common to Tai Chi practitioners. They're usually using it in a different stance. We're just using it in the Bagua walking step. So this keeps one hand more in reserve. Pushing the mountain. So the energy here is focused on the palm roots. The previous one, the energy was focused on the embracing, creating a circle on the outside of the body, this way. Right? And there's this circular ball shape inside. Here, it's much more emphasized on the outside and less on the interior shape because this can collapse. But the palm root has the force. So it feels like the two palm roots are moving in a triangle that's going to meet somewhere in the distance. Shoulders are relaxed. In all of these, the elbows have a feeling of sinking even when they're up in a posture like this. To change direction, toe in, walk the other way. The white ape offers the fruit, so the elbows drop in. This uses some elements of monkey style boxing. The hands are like they're offering a fruit or like a flower opening. The elbows are close together not because you force them, but because you relax the back and the chest. So this creates a more unified power up and down the center of the body, and the ability to absorb attacks close into the body. Change direction. The hands have an out, even though they're coming in, they have an outward reaching action. Toe in. Step out, have an uplifting posture. So the position here is as though I'm throwing something out of my hands, and just when they would leave my hands, that's where the hands stop. There's also an outward piercing force, twisting and drilling and piercing outward. Instead of the shoulders doing that, we want to feel like, to exaggerate a little bit, as I'm twisting and spiraling through the legs, the waist, the shoulders, it creates this spiral for me. I don't have to use the shoulder muscles. Change direction. Spear holding posture. So in Chinese martial arts, in Bagua in particular, you're using the spear as a common weapon. They use a double-headed spear. And this is the posture often that you find yourself in the forms for starting attacks to different directions. So we just put the stick in our hands. Sometimes that's a good way to check your posture. Then take it away. And we're holding the same posture. This hand is reaching forward. We're trying to pull the muscles in the back around to the front. So you should feel it pull all the way to the left kidney, which allows this hand to be active even in this sideward position. It comes forward while rooting me in the ground. To change direction, you can see already there's a chop hidden in there. Sort of a variant of this is the ball holding posture. So it's like holding a big beach ball between your hands. You want to make sure the arm isn't over your head, but it's in front of the crown. The fingers stretching out. Turn the ball. Heaven and earth posture, or touching heaven, penetrating the earth with a piercing hand. So now we're dividing the body high and low while keeping the root. And often we use it to divide the opponent's body and break their root. The eyes are looking through the armpit. So always looking to the back. We're trying to look to the back. And that helps to rotate me. Yin-yang posture, or yin-yang fish posture. So it's like the yin-yang symbol in the Tai Chi, or the Tai Chi symbol. You're making that with your body. At the same time, it's like a fish swimming through the water. Change direction. The right hand reaches back, level with the spine, and presses out as you take this step. The other hand is about mouth height in the front. And lastly, the millstone pushing posture. This is the sort of classic Bagua guard position. It's like, if you've ever seen millstones, they have one horizontal, one vertical, and a big bar comes off the vertical one. And people push them, or cows push them to grind, to make the stones turn. So this is our image, like we're pushing against something that has resistance. The fingers curve in this tile palm. This finger is relatively straight. The other three fingers curve around from the forefinger, and the thumb opposes the pinky, which creates this feeling of like a roof tile. Both palms take that position. As the body turns, the right palm reaches as though it's going to go under the elbow. So in that way, we get all the body lined up into this line. If I leave this hand too far back, it's like I'm fighting one-armed. This side of my body's not engaged. When I bring this arm around, it brings my back muscles around, which engages the whole body to this angle. The palm root sinks down, the fingers reach up. So a common difficulty is people flex their hand back rather than imagining their palm is heavy and they just drop it. And then it's very easy to hold the posture correctly. To change direction, one hand goes over the other and walk in the opposite direction. Okay, let's talk about just some conceptual ideas about why these postures. What are they actually doing? In terms of, we'll take them one by one. The downward pressing palm. We're using the upper body lifting and the lower body sinking to create a strong force that takes us down into our feet. And we demonstrated this a little bit in one sense already. The idea of doing that allows me to pull somebody or to lead them while rooting myself. It also allows me to have strong forces downward while stepping to take somebody down into a lock or to strike. So when we conceptualize these, I'm going to do in this DVD a lot of applications that look like the form, but in fact, it's a principle of the body, right? Downward pressing could be a chop, because the follow-through of it lands me in downward pressing, and it contains the downward motion. By the same token, embracing, it can be this warding off posture that we see in Tai Chi and in other Chinese martial arts, but it can also convey the idea of absorbing something inward. So as he presses, embracing can just be a way to slip from one side to the other. It can involve coming in to grab and hook. It can be used to come inside of someone, right? And so this posture of opening a big ball actually allows us later to make the ball very, very small, even to where it's almost against my chest, and I'm still keeping this shape to offset his force, right, and bring my other hand close. Embracing and pushing the mountain are almost the same, but one uses more of this bumping force, is often how the Chinese translate it as like one car bumping another. So we have this kind of force to break their root. It also uses the palm root more than the embracing palm, and the force coming around, like if Nelson takes the posture and twists sideways, it brings the force around his back on the outside. And there's less of this idea of like an inward embracing force. Let it settle in. Right? Here he can absorb this way. This has much more of a feeling of pushing outward. So the other thing it allows us to do that's not in the embrace is just by rotating. It brings me to Nelson's rear, right, and threatens his eyes with my fingers. Uses the back in a very particular way to create a force of attack, right? By using this squeezing in this posture, it makes my back apply force that can uproot. So the heaven uplifting palm, if we think about it, I'm sinking my tail down while I'm raising the upper body upward. And I talked about this moment of throwing something in the air. This is often the moment you're uprooting the opponent. By rooting myself and lifting my upper body while I connect with the opponent, I'm extending my own spine, and therefore I can extend his spine upward. So a very simple example of that is to simply come in underneath and raise up, right? And raising up against his face bends his spine backward. Another example would be to come from the other side, from the outside, where again, as I raise my arms up, I extend his spine upward and outward. Right? And we can do it very classically like the palm, or more practically where the other hand simply comes in to help. Similarly, because Nelson's a little shorter than me, he can come in underneath me and uproot that way. Also has implications for grabs. Right? By uplifting and rotating, I can create situations where I break loose from a grab or set the force back into his shoulder. And we'll talk more about that when we break down very specific applications, but just the idea of lifting up or coming into him and lifting up is what breaks his spinal alignment. Similarly, or more actually oppositely, the monkey holds the fruit, or the white ape offers the fruit. Here I can use it to absorb an attack. So if Nelson pushes in strongly on me, I can absorb the attack this way and be ready to come out. Or on a sideward push, turning into him. Right? It also unifies the power in the center of the body, so that on a push coming in this way, my hands are going to attack the center, right? And take the whole line with my back following that line upward. Right? We can also think about it unifying my body in terms of locking, right? Or locking to twist. So it brings the body in a unified fashion. The whole back is lifting into him, or the whole back is dragging him this way. Spear holding posture, ball holding posture, almost the same. The spear holding posture tends to make this hand attack. Let's take it from the other side. So that it reaches around the body, right? Which brings us into throws and locks. It also creates chops, right, in both directions. And it's another way that I can offset force by meeting him and turning him. One hand offsets the force, the other hand attacks the center. The same on the inside with a jab hook, right? I can offset the force this way, and this hand then takes the center, right, to create a throw. The ball holding adds a circular element to that, whereas this has a little more of a chopping action. The ball holding creates more of a circular element where one hand penetrates in. If it's met by something, it rolls the other way. Similarly, if I'm on the inside, just in some kind of grappling situation, he's trying to compress me in to grab and come in close. As he presses, I can simply roll the other way. So this idea of actually rolling a ball allows me to change forces and to bring my hands into his face. So if he's coming on one angle, I bring him on the other angle. Right? Similarly, on the outside, it allows this hand to come into play. Even in an offset posture where normally I would have to reach to hit him, by just turning and using the ball, we can roll him back and forth. Okay, so the heaven and earth posture, or touching heaven, penetrating the earth. We're rooting the one side of the body by the hand reaching down. We're stretching the other side upward at the same time. So in a simple situation of using a wedge, right, everything is twisting to this point behind me, so that as I come into Nelson, one hand is basically pinning this leg and cutting it. The other one is rotating him the other way. We can also do it from the outside, so that we're breaking the stance this way. Right? In a grab situation, I can wedge my way out of it, right, by taking one low and one high, which gives me a convergence of forces to the center. And in essence, by lifting my own spine, while rooting down here, I lift his spine up and displace his hips. All right, so this is kind of the idea of the heaven and earth palm. Could also be used as just an off balance this way. So these are just different ideas. Yin yang. We're creating a spiral around our body. And therefore we can spiral his body the same way. Right? No matter what, it can be this, could be on the outside this way. It could be from an inside position of using a spiral. And my intent is always to walk. Right? And it's the walking and the turning that actually throw him. Right? By walking and turning, and my next step is going to take me right here, it brings him around my body. So again, I'm using the turning of my spine to twist his spine. And then the millstone posture, which sometimes morphs in Xingyi, into a guard position or some kind of, in a more of a kickboxing situation, it morphs into this kind of guard, can extend out to here, but in Bagua it can also twist to the side. So in this case, we're creating wedges that take us to the side and cut his line, or come on the inside, hook it with that one, right, that come on the inside to attack. If it's a double punch, like a jab and a cross, each block is basically trying to do this. And then the same again, I'm trying to cut to walk, or I go the other way and create a wedge. All right, on a more simple, direct level, on a straight punch, I'm just wedging straight in, right? And my hand's going to turn as I cut it. Right? So again, it's the turning and the wedge that creates the spiral force going into his body. So that focuses on the postures, but let's take it back now to the step again. We talked about relaxing, using the psoas muscles, so the leg muscles are relaxed, how that would play out in kicking. We talked a little bit about the hooking step and the swing step. We didn't really talk about how they're used. So looking at the legs, the natural step, if I pick up from here, even if I'm touching him, and I move the foot without changing the upper body, it hides the kicks, right? So that the kicks can come without changing the upper body at all. And it doesn't matter whether I use a swing step kick. Let's do it this way. That arcs around to attack different points. I use a hook step kick, right, which could be a side kick. But again, the key is that the upper body doesn't change. The upper body is just like walking. So at the last minute, I turn it to something else, or I turn it to something else, or I turn it to something else. By the same token, trapping legs. My idea in circle stepping, or the whole idea of it, is that if I'm walking in a circle, I'm generally walking through his center of mass. The center of the circle becomes where we touch. So I'm trying to make that the center of my circle, and I'm walking through his center. And that allows me to trap without really thinking about it. So we step, trap, or hook step, trap, or I couldn't get this one, so I step into this leg and trap. Similarly, on this side, if it's give me this one, and he crosses, right? I'm walking into the center, so I wasn't able to trap here, but on the next step, I'm walking right through his stance. We need to think about also how the foot and the knee lift. So if I'm doing this way, it's a little harder to throw a knee. If I pick up this way, every step becomes a knee. If I move in, I'm kneeing his leg. If I move in deeper, I'm kneeing the torso. If I come on the inside, this can be a knee. And even as you step down, because it's a flat step, it's a stomping step or a raking step down. The same here, we'll see it more in the crane stepping in the third DVD. This kind of stepping in and down is just an extrapolation of doing this and taking the leg higher. It also allows us to just, even if there's a kick and I miss the kick, I skid off his shin, my foot naturally tracks toward the center of the body all the time. By the same token, if he attacks my legs, so he goes to kick, give me a low one in the ankle, right? He goes to kick my leg, I'm ready to step around it. Or if he goes to kick me here, throw it the back leg. Switch legs and kick with that one, right? The natural step is taking me here. Even if he gets a piece of me, my knee is coming up to protect, right? If I come on the inside, back kick, this one, back kick, right? It's the same. My natural step is just takes my center of mass away from where he's kicking, right? So this action all the time. Lastly, it allows me to get in position for different kinds of throws that involve jamming the legs, so things where I'm stepping across his stance, or more standard kind of throws where you're reaping things, right? For us, it's just a natural extension of stepping along their leg, right? I want to come in here with the millstone, and now I just turn it. Okay, so the leg work is very key to the strategies in Bagua. And as we go along, you'll see that you're using combinations of hook steps and swing steps. And it's often, I might start to go this way and I encounter resistance, so I go the way he's resisting. And I end up close in to attack. Okay, so we've talked about the postures, about the basic stepping, some ideas about conceptually why they're done that way, how they're employed. Now I'm going to show different free changes of direction on the circle, because there are many ways to change direction, and you're going to see some of these come out in the applications that will follow. So if we're walking in the downward pressing palm, we did a very simple change of toe in, toe out, and walk the other way. But sometimes when we need to move into the opponent and use different kinds of changes with mixed kobu and baibu steps. Or to just change and keep going the same direction. Similarly, we can walk in a figure 8 pattern, as though we're walking from one circle to another circle. And we can do it on either step, whether it be to change here and step to the new circle this way, or to change here and step to the new circle. Secondly, in certain postures, it's more useful to do more dynamic kinds of changes, or to change direction, where the body moves a little bit like a dragon, flowing around a pole. Also turning to the outside of the circle. And lastly, there's a step that uses that yin-yang pattern in the center. So we're spiraling through the center of the circle while changing hands. And that's used a lot to change direction and tight on the opponent. And lastly, we can flow smoothly from one posture to another. And then add direction changes to it. And in fact, it's this free flow shows you that they're not fixed postures at all, but that, in a sense, we're constantly changing from one posture to another all the time. Particularly when we engage against an opponent, it's almost hard to say which posture you're doing. Because in a moment here, I'm still in this posture, but I'm already transitioning to something else. And even as I transition to that, I could be transitioning again to another posture and another posture. So when I'm demonstrating applications, which will be following this, one of the difficulties will be we'll try and make it look exactly like one of the postures. But I think if you look closely, you'll see that in some cases, postures are mixing together. And that's just the nature of the practice. That's the way it's supposed to be in the end. So we've shown the palms, now let's talk about application. We're going to start with the downward pressing palm. It's in some ways one of the easier ones to use because it more easily roots you, especially against an opponent's force. I usually, in teaching, like to start with grabs because it's an easy way to go slow and feel that the opponent can stop me if my step is not right, if my root is not right. They can stop me without hurting me and show me where my technique is going wrong. And then we'll proceed to things with punching attacks, grab attacks. So if he's grabbing the wrist, we demonstrated this earlier. I want to use my step coordinated with the hand going to the downward pressing to lead him. All right, so done a little bit more quickly. I'm leading him in, and then I'm making a throw here. One more time, he's grabbing, I'm coming in. So, slowly, he's grabbing, I'm leading him to where I was, so into the void space that I'm vacating. This is going to be a major idea in Bagua, is that as I leave the space, I force him to enter it, or I pin him in the space that I left. I'm also extending him. So by leading him into the void, I extend his shoulder and his hip. So we've broken this more natural alignment, which also prevents him being able to really use the other hand effectively. Secondly, it brings his head in closer to me. So it allows me to have other ideas about the technique if I feel I can't do this one, or I feel that he's going to set back and throw something. I can change it because his head is very close and it's hard for him to block. As I twist him, I'm creating an axis of rotation here that goes with my body rotating. My rotation this way extends his. So his body's rotating like this. Right? And we're creating a functional rotation for us and a dysfunctional rotation for the opponent. Then the first step has to take me near his foot or even onto his foot. right? We'll say near for now. And then my body's rotating in with a cutting force. Because my hand wants to turn on a circle, I'm creating a cutting spiral in this direction, and that's going to take him farther off his position. Meanwhile, my hook steps down. So it's as though I'm walking a very tight circle that's going to come back around at him. So it steps down to plant in front of his leg, and now all the rotations starting with the ankle, going to the knee, to the hip, into the arms are all happening simultaneously. One is leading him around me, the other one is breaking the alignment at the elbow, while pushing off to take the step cuts his knee, so it locks the knee out. Right? And then I'm simply walking through. It's okay, just leave it. So, the same things we talked about in Bagua, the step, the hooking, the opening the body, the rotation of the body, my spine extending and rooting at the same time. So as I root, I break his root. As I extend my spine, upper part of my back upward while sinking downward, I make his arm go up while my root sinks down. And then adding the spinning forces onto it creates a cutting rotation like blades that are spinning. We have to look at if I fail to do those things, if I don't mud step, for example. If on my first step I land too much in front of him, I'm going to walk into this hand. If I don't lead him in coordination with the rotation of my right hip, he can strike me like he did. In other words, I'll be caught right here. If I step that one, fine, but then I don't mud step here, in other words, I come off my heel this way, it allows him to root back again. You can see that I don't have him connected here to the center of his body. He's able to break it at the elbow, and now he's back on his root again. Because at this moment of leaning, I've drawn him here, and then if I lean, he's able to bend this back, and I'm walking into that hand. If I don't step properly in front of him with the intent of turning, if I just try and root down and by main force throw him, all Nelson has to do is sit down and drop his elbow, and I'm going to be thrown backwards. So again, this movement, whether we do it this way or the other ways we do it, brings into play all the elements of the stepping we talked about. The proper body alignment. Another main thing that beginners do wrong is to put their head forward. So again, if I put my head forward, first of all, I'm vulnerable to him just falling into me. Secondly, I've broken my alignment, and in putting my head forward, I've pushed him back onto his alignment, which allows him to root his body so he can hit me harder. By keeping the head erect, I have more distance from him, and I use my spine as a drill bit to turn into him. So again, we can step in, cut, and throw. Right? And something that I like to think about, which reminds me of the Kajukenbo days, is when you take somebody down, the walking step naturally takes you into an attack and to cover the 8 directions. Okay, so that's one application, but what if he doesn't really allow me to step in here? He starts, I don't get this one off properly, or he anticipates a little bit and he starts in with that other punch. I can use this Baibu step to stop him for a second while my hand comes in and covers the top, and now my Kobu step is a knee strike. So if this is Kobu, and we just lift it up a little bit, we're striking the knee and breaking the alignment. And then I'm stepping into downward pressing palm. And again, my intention is to rotate here. So right away, I have follow-up attacks if necessary. So let's look at that again. A little faster. He's grabbing, thinking about punching. I'm stepping in, knee, and throwing down. Now at speed from the grab. Other attacks we can use, simply off a straight punch, right? Downward pressing palm. Right? So when he punches, I'm coming in with the palm here, twisting the head to break him down. Right? But walking through at speed. If I can't get the palm, I can do it as a clothesline where the body's pressing this way, right? So I'm coming down to a downward pressing palm like this, which also gives me the head. So it could be a 1-2. He could do jab cross too. It doesn't matter. This one comes into clothesline, right? Straight down. And at speed. The hip, we can use it to attack the hip. So if he comes with the front hand and I can move in here, this leg is turning with the kobu step to lock the leg so that if he tries to pick it up, he can pick it up, but he gets caught on my leg long enough for me to insert my hand. My hand still does this screwing motion in coordination with the body turning. Because if I just push, Nelson can resist me. But if I turn with it, it tends to break his stance. So this can be a strike to the ribs, cutting along them, or cut and then take the hip and take him down. Okay, another application was a favorite of one of my teachers, Zhang Hua Sun, who was much shorter than me, is a defense against the push that he called the old monk rings the bell. So Nelson will do that one. If I come into push, he downward presses and strikes with his head. Do it slow. And then at speed. And you see then at speed, the head strike often goes into the chest. Right? The nice thing about that one, since we're here already, is he can follow up with the monkey offers the fruit and take me back with that while the knee strikes. Other applications that start to look less like the downward pressing palm. So on a straight punch coming off of this, brushing the eyebrows with gold silk. So here I meet the eyebrow level and I brush the forehead back while I twist. Because again, my thought is not to go straight back. There are people that can get out of that, especially if he's shorter than me, he can just roll with it, right? Or spin out the other way. Yeah. If I twist his head, it's much harder for him to do that because I twist his whole spine and because my body's starting to rotate like this. So at speed, when he comes in, I'm brushing the eyebrows, right? And we can add, as we brush, we can add attacks to vital points like the eyes to make him go along with us, especially if he's stronger. So again, brushing the eyebrows. And then lastly, something that looks farther afield yet is if he throws a punch and we chop in. A lot of people interpret this as downward pressing palm because its ultimate follow-through of the force is back to this spiraling posture. So on a kind of a hook, I'm just moving in to strike, and my follow-through is this way. Right? Whether he goes down or not, if it's covered, I can do the same thing again, right? And this time, take him that way. So at speed, he throws the first one, he covers. Okay, we're going to look. It's difficult to separate these two, and in fact, some styles, their 8 palms don't include the embrace. Instead, they do this. Some people don't do the pushing them out, and then they do the embrace. Generally, they work very well together, so we'll put them together. In some cases, we'll isolate one. In some cases, we'll do them both. The first application, I think, is one of the most interesting, is when Nelson comes into push, I'm going to use embrace to set my root. So by maintaining this posture and spreading, and this brings into a whole idea in Bagua about oppositional forces, that in any posture, the embrace posture is a good example, we have forces pulling us apart, and we have forces going in, and they equalize each other. We have the sensation that our arms are floating up, but at the same time that the elbows are sinking down, and those forces are equal, allowing us to be relaxed. We have the idea of the head going up and the tail going down. We have the idea that our knees are straightening, but at the same time they're bending. So that many of the standing post postures that you see in internal martial arts are maintaining this idea of this kind of potentiated energy in the body. That we have all the forces moving in all the directions and they equalize each other out so that you're relaxed, but at the same time you're ready to move suddenly. So in this case, he comes in slowly, I'm meeting him here, and as he pushes into me, I'm using this to actually lift his root a little bit. At the same time, I'm using rotation and separation to separate the space so that I can get into it. And then I'm rotating back the other way as I drive the step forward in the mud step. And again, I'm not going to walk into him straight, because if Nelson just drives with his hip, he can drive me off my route again, right? By using the mud step against me. Instead, I'm going to walk in on the curve. Okay, so this brings into play using the spiral, let's just keep that foot there, to break his alignment this way, because I'm going to pin this foot from stepping. And at the same time, I'm turning while rotating. So in this case, rather than pulling him into the void, I'm creating a void that I enter and take his space up completely while I spiral the body to push, which again leaves me in position here to attack. All right, so if we look at it, I'm using the embracing palm first. And the moment I have contact and my body steps in, I'm turning. That turning takes his arms from, if he's trying to keep his elbows down, it takes his arms from being here to being there. And it gains me, by using the spiral forces, it gains me an inch. So I end up moving from this part of his forearm to the elbow. All right, in Chinese martial arts, there's the idea of 3 gates. This is gate 1, the middle gate, the far gate, or the root, the middle, and the tip. If I can control the middle, it's very hard for him to hit me with his shoulder. It's very hard to hit me with his hand. If I only control the hand, the elbow can strike it. Right? If I don't control the elbow properly, the shoulder can strike. But if I have the elbow pinned to where by pinning it, I disrupt his structure in the way that you see his ribs are lifting up while mine are settling down into him. So I'm lifting my ribs and lifting his ribs. My shoulder stays down, his shoulder goes up. My back stays down, his back goes up. And then we're going to push the mountain to take him down. And pushing the mountain can also involve this palm strike. So if he comes in at speed a little bit, a little faster than that, I'm coming up here and pushing. All right, now, another way to look at this is if I get in there and I can fade into him deeper and use the leg to cut his leg. So in a sense there's several components. One is the knee is coming in to strike his leg. I'm blocking off the leg, which means I could just step here and push. My fingers are on the eyes, right? Or if I get stuck here, it's like walking back for a second, as though I'm going to walk out the other way. So again, it's speed coming inside with and reaping the leg. All right, other ways is to use the pushing the mountain and the embrace posture lend themselves to crossing the opponent. Simply because by very subtle body shifting, by turning one way and the other way, my hands pass the center line. And it creates a kind of passing parry. So, sorry, and you're going to punch with the right hand. This one strikes out. Right? I can use it like the embrace, or I can use it like the pushing the mountain posture. As he parries it, I'm going to lead him into the weak point of his stance and pin him on this foot while I step in. So now I have these complex forces that we're using. As I step in, I'm moving his root back, but I'm also twisting his root. I'm pinning him on this leg while I'm pulling these ribs up, so I'm creating a spiral of his body this way while I spiral into him the other way. So if we look at it again, I give a hand to get, so he takes the bait, and then I'm stepping in and throwing down, right? Using pushing the mountain. So again, coming in, this press pulls down, and this just pushes. All right, and if you think about it, you can see that I'm not really just using pushing the mountain. I'm using downward pressing with pushing the mountain. And that starts to look like yin-yang palm. So you can see that it's very difficult to stay with just one idea, that it's always a blend. Here we're blending embrace to pushing the mountain to downward pressing, right? And pushing the mountain at the same time. The monkey offering the fruit palm. So again, this centralizes the body's energy up the center line. It also allows me to absorb things closer in while maintaining structure and take the center line of his body. It also creates this spiraling force that can cut joints very effectively. So on a simple wrist grab, just by spiraling up and walking forward, I can already break things back into his structure. A lot of the ideas used in Chinna is by locking one joint. Locking one joint doesn't get me anything. If I don't affect his whole structure, he can come at me with the rest of his body by folding things on me. If I can make that go into his structure so that his shoulder is affected and his back hip is affected, I can use it to uproot. All right, so some simple ideas with that, where we're creating this spiral force going this way, but then the force is also going towards him, is just a simple lock this way, right, of bringing it into him and twisting. And if we think about the monkey offers the fruit, I could do it off just even catching his hand, right? I'm trying to walk this way. So my idea, you're just going to have to go up on your toes a little, right, is to walk through but break his wrist on the way through, right? So my idea, you do it to me, is to walk under the arm. Yeah, walk under. Right, so that he can get behind me this way. Right? So the monkey offers the fruit, right? We're creating a spiral here that torques these wrist bones, torques the hand, and at the same time I'm not grabbing him. So it leaves me free if Nelson suddenly pushes his arm down to shoot one hand out at him. Right? And again, we can use the monkey idea differently to control him and throw him. The classic use of it appears in the 64 linear forms later, where if I push Nelson, he enters through the inside. You're going to spread first, right? And then he attacks up to the chin. So as he steps, he draws me down with the downward pressing, and then he steps in with the knee strike. And this drives up, this drives up this way. Okay, once he's there, once I'm in this interior position, I can now turn and walk with him. The same if I'm on the outside with it. Right? We're just turning and walking and twisting the head. So at speed from the inside, you're going to do it to me. I'm going to push. All right? And from the outside, okay, so moving to the outside with the white ape offers the fruit, it can be done from a situation where he's coming in to grab, or he's flanked me on the side and I can use it to turn him. So from either side, using it to just turn him and strike. It can be used to meet him with a normal posture and then walk and twist the head and bring it back. All right? So here, I can either twist the neck or I can extend the neck. It's kind of like a poor neck set, where I'm extending the bones in his neck and cutting across the windpipe as I drag him back, right? And from the perspective of the form, it's like turning in and walking, right? You just can't do it at speed without hurting his neck. Okay, the heaven uplifting palm. We talked about it conceptually as lifting the opponent's root while maintaining your own. And there are various ways to do this from various positions. Again, let's start with something very simple, like a push or a lapel grab. So as he comes in to push, I have to blend my step with him. All right? And in this case, we're using basically a backwards version of the mud step, or an idea as if we were about to step forward, back, and then move forward right away, which is a very common engagement point in Bagua of taking a half step back to get on the circle with the person. So as he comes in to push, I'm stepping back and absorbing his force so that he comes forward in his root and he overextends his arm. So already he's not maintaining a good pushing position where his tail's down. Like if his tail's down, he can push me and follow in mud stepping. If he overextends a little bit, he's already coming towards me. I'm going to accentuate that by spiraling my hands up, almost like I'm doing the white ape offers the fruit, but with this feeling of opening into this palm and lifting up. So I need to go to the end point where his elbows come to the center and straighten out. And now I'm getting to the point where I'm ready to spread, right? So we're in this intention of going to lift his root, cut with spiral forces, which are engaging with my forward step, right? So again, we go back. All right, my forward step now becomes a kick. right, which attacks the groin as I start to move into him. So if we look at it smoothly again, fading back to let him enter the empty space, spiraling up and starting to turn the body one way or the other. Usually it's going to be towards the way I'm stepping. So that sets him back, and you're going to hold me a little bit, into the hip. The foot comes up to kick and then moving forward into him. And now I'm spreading into the heaven uplifting palm, right, to attack the face. These can strike, or they can chop the neck, or we can spiral and throw. So if we look at it again, all right, what we have to be careful of when we step back, if I don't step according to his step, if Nelson steps deep, and I just anticipate the step, he's going to drive me back. Part of the idea in Bagua is that I don't step, I blend with his force so that I'm only finishing my step after he finishes his. If I finish mine first, then he can follow into me very easily and uproot me. Secondly, when I lift the elbows, if I just slap them like this, straight up, there's no effect on lifting his elbows at all, because it's not going to be as strong as his downward force of his elbows connected to his back, connected to his back leg. If instead I fade and my hands come in, as though they're going to come in and then separate, his arms get straightened out, holding on. And that gives me time to lift my foot. So we're also using the idea that it's impossible for him to... What does a guy who grabs you want to do? He wants to pick you up. If I go to pick Nelson up and he closes my elbows, no, the other way, I'm picking myself up. All right, and I'm trying to pick him up. And that's impossible. Right? So we're using this principle here. If I do this, he can't lift me. Even if I don't get his elbows, just being here, he can't lift me up. He can maneuver me a little bit, but he's also moving himself as he does it. All right, so at speed, when he comes in, I'm just kicking here. Or if he pushes and gets me to come in hard and gets me to go back, I'm retreating, and that sets me up for the kick. And then I can follow with what Nelson did before, which is downward pressing, right, and strike. Alternatively, if I'm quicker off the mark, I'm just going to come in here, right? Or if we have a situation where we're grappling and there's a grabbing idea, I can step back and plant this in, right? So I'm using this in uplifting to set up this kick. All right, so at speed, from a grabbing, using it to set up that way. Another idea off a push is this, this movement of spreading out. Sometimes they call it the immortal sifts the rice, right? Like you have a sifter and you're separating the wheat from the chaff. So as he comes in, I'm just coming here and piercing. Right? So again, I fade a little bit and then move in. With my step, and my intention is outward and through. So Nelson comes in. Thinking about it, things that look a little bit more like the twisting in the Bagua. If, just take me on this side. Because Nelson's a little shorter than me, it's easier for him to penetrate under than it is for me to do it to him. So if we have a meeting point, and I'm overpowering his force, he pierces in from beneath with the heaven uplifting and twists his body to throw me to the side. You have to put me flat on my back. So again, and at speed, for me, it's easier to go over. So from this side, and then turning. Right? We'll take it from this side as well. It's easier, again, for me to pierce over on Nelson. So I'm using heaven uplifting to shear the face, twist the spine, and then I'm simply rotating to create the throw, as though I'm going to walk. Okay, our last application is sometimes called uprooting the willow tree. The idea that a willow tree has shallow roots in the ground, so they're easily uprooted by a storm. So when Nelson comes in with the punch, I'm meeting it to break the center line, right? To take the center. This hand comes down to cut anything he's going to do with this hand, and I'm shearing into his stance with my body. So you can see I have a force going this way. I have a force spiraling down, which breaks his leg inward. At the same time, I'm starting to rotate in the other direction. And so we're setting up this complex series of forces where there's no one point for him to resist because I'm attacking several directions at once. And then I'm going to go to the heaven uplifting part. So again, slow, and then we'll do a quicker one, stepping in. This covers the line. It can also strike. Throwing. And then at a little bit of speed, he comes in. Okay, we're going to mix two together here because they tend to blend with each other, and in different styles, one is replaced by the other. One is holding the ball, and the other is the spear holding posture. So, and some people call this the lion posture, like the lion holds the ball in those Chinese statues. So if Nelson comes in, we're going to take us one where we move to the flank. So on a punch, I'm going to move to the flank and roll the ball. Let's take the other side. I'm going to move to the flank, cover, and turn my ball over so that this attacks the eyes. All right, so that's part one. If he defends this, I'm going to do the second part, which is to roll the ball the other way. Let's look at it this side again. So moving to the side, threatening the face, and then rolling the ball the other way, where this is still maintaining this ball holding shape, and this one cuts the back. So let's look at what's going on. First, when he comes in, I try and move in such a way as that I control the middle. And I'm already starting my circular step, right, while I'm drawing him into the space that I just vacated. He's going to want to pull back and hit with the other hand. So the only way I can, if I just walk here, he's going to track me. But if I bring the other hand in such a way that it creates a threat, and I bring my step so that he can't step, he can't turn back against me, and he's forced farther into the void space I've left. Secondly, I'm creating two forces. One is a ball rolling over the top, while the other is my body like a ball spiraling this way. And the last force is going towards his center of mass. So I have a triangulation toward the center while I'm rotating him this way, while the top hand is rotating him this way. And that makes three forces he has to deal with simultaneously. One cutting his root, one taking him forward, and one taking him vertically. So in Bagua, generally, we see a lot of the obvious circles are horizontal, but there's often the less obvious circles are the vertical circles or these diagonal circles that are simultaneous with that, where one part is going this way and the top half of the body is going the other way. So again, if I am too far out here, I'm not going to get my step there in time before he can hit me with that hand. So my first step has to gain ground here. And this is where that mud step comes in. I haven't committed my step. I've just started to step. And then he follows through with the same. I touch his hand, but I haven't done anything with it yet. From his point of view, I'm still in front of him. But in fact, I'm already halfway to this position. Secondly, I need to threaten the center. So just as he starts to retract the punch, I'm taking the center with my Baibu step, and it's cutting along his leg towards the back leg. So we're starting to take his center of gravity and rotate it like this. And then I add this force coming over the top, which rotates him that way. So if he tries to accommodate by rotating or walking with me, which is what I'm stopping him by doing this. All right, then his way out is to rotate the other way, right? And my hands are going to turn over. But hopefully I'll catch him before that. So right here, as he starts to get his root back on the back leg, I've got a force going this way, a force going this way, and one over the top. Now I'm going to reverse all the forces. So this force is now coming over the top. My body's still striding through, but on this arc instead of that arc. And I'm rotating the other way. And he has to adjust from the first three to those three in an instant, which is not easy to do. So I'm able to pull him into this second part. Okay, the key in Bagua very often is we're using our spinal alignment to break their spinal alignment. Most of the throws in Bagua are really about breaking spinal alignment and hip alignment. by using our own spine to rotate and create rotations in him. If I just keep the shape and rotate my body, I can move his body. Unless he moves the same way I'm moving and stays rooted, it's easy to off-balance him then. So when he comes in to punch, I'm going to move to the side. And again, it's speed. Okay. Coming from, if he jabs and crosses, I'm using the spear holding posture. So again, if he comes, I can catch the inside. This one's going to hit immediately, and then when that one tries to come, I'm changing back to the other side. All right, so simple. If he's punching and hooking, I'm using this idea. This is my intention, is to just walk through him. But sometimes, if I don't get this one solid and he passes it, I'm going to have to change to the other side. Okay, so we'll look at it. Let's do it at speed. First where I walk through that way. The second one where you counter, right? Okay, other uses of this. And here we also get into where this one's going to look like a mixture of several Dingshi postures. He's grabbing. Again, we're doing the same things we did earlier, where we're opening to the void, we're stepping offline. But now I'm going to drive this towards him so that I'm basically doing this posture while I catch his elbow. Okay, so this one is pressing forward, and it could even add this spiraling force, while this one lifts and spirals because we're twisting this way. So that creates forces straight into his body, but also rotating him. And at the same time, I can break at this angle too, his structure. So we're just throwing him here. So again, if you grab, coming in, you can take him straight back. Or we can take him on a slight angle of rotation this way. The last one, more of a situation where we've met like this. I could take it off of a grab if I can get out and re-grab, but generally it's going to happen more this way. It's one of the postures we used earlier in the more fluid stepping, right? So when our hands meet, again, I'm stepping through, keeping the shape of the ball, so that if I get hung up along the way, I still have other things I can do to attack. But if I can smoothly get the transition and step out, I empty the space and drop him into the space I was in. So this will be quicker now. Okay, so now we'll look at touching heaven, penetrating the earth. We talked about it as creating a wedge on this vertical plane and bringing the forces together on one line in a way where I can still engage my back. If I just try and bring the forces together here, it's weak. But if I'm using a spiraling twist, I'm engaging my whole back in the spiral. And I can use these forces to wedge his stance out of position. So on a very simple level, if he comes in, I'm meeting the hand, wedging inside, and this one attacks the groin. All right, so let's look at it from the other side. We're clear. Coming in, all right, so we have a spiraling force that's starting to twist the other way, and this force is attacking this way, but not straight, it's also twisting. So even when I don't hit his groin, if I just touch his leg, it buckles the leg by twisting it. So as my body twists, now I'm using this posture to torque his leg while the upper part torques his spine. I'm also creating an up and down force so that I'm pinning him on this leg while I'm raising him up. At the same time, I'm twisting this way, and I have a force that's cutting this way. Whether it hits the groin, whether it hits the leg, it doesn't really matter. So the simple application of that is our hands have a meet point. As I enter, he goes to defend with the other hand, but I'm actually attacking here and taking his face to throw. And we could look at this as an entry, as though I'm going to switch postures, right? Just in motion, I'm switching and coming back to it. If I don't use the groin as the attack,
we can do the same thing. And as he goes in to cover this, I'm taking the leg. Okay, so what's important to realize is I'm not grabbing his leg. I'm not trying to lift him up. I'm simply trying to create a wedge that moves into the center. Now here, Nelson could still get out by just rolling around and getting loose. So I need to do something to either the center of mass, the groin, the leg, to pin him. So as I come in, this one either attacks here to file, like filing a piece of metal, right? And that twists his hip, or I'm twisting his leg. So as I do this, his leg is already leaving the floor. All I have to do is follow it to uproot. All right, so again, we're using a complex series of forces, emptying the space, drawing him into the space, pinning him down as we lift him up, spiraling one way as we spiral the leg the other way. So again, at speed, we meet, this comes in. Okay, so we did it coming from the outside of the leg. Now we can do it coming from the inside of the leg. If I'm forced to go to the inside, or from the inside to the outside, maybe we're in a struggle here. So I use this to lift the elbow and pierce. This one takes the inner side of the leg and we toss him back this way. It's basically the same technique. So again, we're in our struggle here. I'm taking him to the outside and uprooting that way. So for a headlock, which can be difficult to get out of, Nelson's going to drop down and set the palms in position, and then he's going to spiral them in opposite directions to create the throw. All right, and now one at speed. So let's just break this down quickly. If Aaron grabs me, he wants to pull me down here so he can throw me, right? Or he wants to pull me down so he can punch my face a bunch of times, right? So as he pulls me down, what he's doing is rooting himself while he's breaking my center around him, where he can also throw me over the top. One favorite of Adriano Emperado was to stick the knuckle in here and grind it and do a hip throw. Any of those things are possible if I let him break my root. So as he comes in to break the root, by pulling me forward, I'm going to rest my hand here, which makes it a little bit harder for him. All right? It's not enough. He can still pull me. And I won't, no matter how hard, even if he turns his face away and I can't get his eye, keep your hand here, he still can get me. But if I break this, then you can see that he's rooting there to pull me down. So if as he pulls me, I set this up, and I just spiral here. All I'm doing is that palm, he has no strength to pull me, and then it's very easy to take him. Okay, so that's the key to this technique, is these opposite forces again, where one hand is preventing me going down and also lifting, the other one's breaking his stance by cutting, and allows me to maintain my root. Okay, the yin-yang fish palm, where we're wrapping things around our body. This has a lot of applications in throwing because you're wrapping into people to throw them. Generally in Bagua, we're avoiding, we could interpret yin-yang as like something like this, a wrapping body throw, but generally because we're thinking about mobility, I don't want to get tied up in a body-to-body situation with them. So the throws tend to be a little bit more Aiki-like. This example is the classic one that people show in China. It's a wrapping throw where you're using like off balancing him front and back, high and low. So it's got an element of this one, but in the opposite configuration. And actually, if we look at this, it's really like this when we switch it, right? If we let the hands turn over the top, we start to move into the yin-yang posture anyway. So when Nelson comes in to push, or it could be off of double punches, it doesn't really matter. Like 1-2 punch, I mean, right? And I could catch his head or I could catch his arm. But the key is that I'm first creating space for his hands to enter. Let's take it off a slow, like a push, right? I'm creating space for his hands to enter, and then I'm going to enter the space, the weak spot in his stance, which is over here, while I spiral. So I'm creating one force again that's going down, one that's going up. And then at the same time, I'm inserting a spinning force in this direction. Right? And I'm using the step to do it. So the key is in the first step. Right? That as he's landing his foot with the push, slow, it's got to be slow. Right? I'm blending with it. Right? To land my step just outside of his. And then I'm blending in with his body. And this one's pulling down, this one's guiding up. At the same time, I rotate the body to walk. So the weak point in Nelson stance is if I can rotate him this way. Right? Bring him forward and then rotate him. That breaks the spinal line. It brings his center of gravity back over his heels and actually behind this heel. So when we meet, coming in, spiraling up and down, and then turning to twist. All right, so at speed off of a push, coming in, or off of punches. Right, he's giving me punches. Give me this one first, let's say. Right, coming in here. Okay? All kinds of spiraling throws. If he punches with this hand, I'm doing yin-yang palm as though I'm going like this. Right? So I'm creating a spiral that way, which he tends to start to resist, but I'm actually going to end up going the other way in the end by continuing the spiral. It reverses the other direction. So from here, all right, similarly I can take him, let's do this way here. I can take him this way where I continue the same spiral but catch him behind my back and whip his body around. So the last Dingshi posture is the millstone pushing posture. We'll show two applications of that because in tape 2 with the Lao Bajang, the old 8 palms, every palm begins with that posture. So we'll see many, many applications of it. But just a simple idea is, again, we're using the wedge. This hand reaching under the other arm is what supplies the force and allows us to bring both hands into play even in side-facing positions. So if our hands meet in this situation, by piercing underneath, this hand attacks the chest, this one's cutting the neck, and I'm walking to bring Nelson around me. To show it from the other side, if we meet here, piercing underneath, my right hand attacks the solar plexus, my left hand spirals, and we twist and walk out. So, give me this side again. At speed, we're a little faster. When the hands meet, and then from an outside position, if I can't spiral into the inside, particularly if he lowers his elbow as we engage, I can attack to the top. And now I can spiral back this way as I reap the leg and walk. So, in this situation, taking the leg is just a question of using my step. I'm not trying to kick it up in the air, I'm just trying to drag it along the floor. And the hands, as they meet, it appears to Nelson that I'm walking this way, but as soon as his other hand comes into play or I meet his face, I'm walking in the other direction, right? And I'm cutting the leg. So we'll do it at speed. He comes in. And one more time. So, in conclusion, the Dingshi provides the key foundational structure and some of the key ideas about application of Bagua techniques. What's important to remember is, although we did some things fast, that the actual training of the Dingshi is this very slow walking. And you want to start with slow, stable, steady steps, the breathing even, relaxed, calm. And gradually over time, you progress to faster steps. You also want to start with short steps where the body can stay in balance, and over time you can progress to longer reaching steps. This method, beyond the fighting techniques that we've shown, is the basic Neigong Qigong in Bagua. And it's, in some sense, a meditation in motion. The idea is that the body's in motion, but the mind is still. That within the circles, there's a void. And if you can execute it that way, you're much more easily able to utilize the kind of techniques we were doing. Endless circle walking is the key to Bagua. Again, I can only reiterate the founder's comment. There's no exercise more important than circle walking. Circle walking is more important than martial arts techniques. There is a famous practitioner who studied with Li Zuming who only did Ding Shi and was able to actualize his fighting skills. And I've always used that as my guide to practice because everything starts with Ding Shi and I always come back to Ding Shi. And if you do that, you'll be able to employ these kind of techniques very easily. My lineage in Bagua is the Liang style Bagua from Liang Zhenpu, who studied directly with the founder Deng Haichuan. Or I should say, who is believed to be the founder of Bagua, because there is some debate about that. Liang Zhenpu studied with Deng Haichuan very late in Deng's life. So most people believe that although he got some transmission of knowledge from Deng Haichuan, that he trained extensively with two of his top pupils, Chen Tinghua and Yin Fu, who have their own lineages in Bagua. And so in that sense, Liang Zhenpu Bagua has a bit of some ideas from Yin Fu Bagua, some ideas from Chung style. Chung style tends to focus a little more on the wrapping, winding energy with throwing and incorporation of Sui Jiao, Chinese wrestling techniques. Yin style includes more striking hand techniques and is based has some Lohan style Kung Fu built into it. I learned from several people, so my experience is not from one teacher. I started Bagua actually in Zhengrun Zhao's Bagua with Vince Black, who is the president and founder of North American Tang Shu Dao. And then we studied under some of Li Zuming's disciples, particularly Zhang Hua Sun in Beijing. So we learned Li's method of doing the palm changes, his basic drills, training exercises. And then I had the opportunity to also study with Wang Shitang, who was a disciple of Guo Gemin. Guo Gemin was Li Zuming's senior in the Liang Zhenpu Bagua and was kind of legendary in the Beijing area for his abilities with Bagua. And Wang Shitang, although basically taught the same method and system, gave me another perspective on it, another take on the Lao Bajang, linear movements, and a very different take on applying things because he was a much bigger man than Zhang. He would tend to use more direct attacking applications, whereas Zhang Hua Sun was short and stocky and had a background in Chinese opera and Chinese wrestling. So he was able to do things in close that are very difficult to do without those body skills. And then lastly, I've been working with Gao Jiwu in Beijing, whose grandfather studied with Yin Fu, but whose father studied obviously with his grandfather and with Guo Gemin. So they bring in another emphasis to this Liang Zhenpu system, but yet their forms are almost the same, and they do variations of those. And so my experiences in working with different practitioners who basically do the same style, but who have very different body types, temperaments, backgrounds in martial arts, has given me a perspective on different ways to do things. Instead of being fixated on one way to do a form or one way to do an application, to think about it from a perspective of just the principle itself that is the thread that runs through all these things. I started in Ishin Kempo karate, which was an offshoot of Ishin-Ryu, basically Okinawan karate. I also studied Taekwondo briefly. My first martial art that I really achieved a level of development in that I was happy with was Filipino martial arts, specifically Pakita Tercia, Arnis or Kali, which was taught by Leo Gahi. That art had a lot of circular movement and emphasis on footwork, and I believe that probably influenced a lot of my take on martial arts I studied later. The idea, and Pakita Tercia particularly used this idea of quartering the opponent, getting to his flank to take corners, to shave corners off his movement so you could make unobstructed strikes in return. It used footwork as an evasive tactic, just like Bagua, to set up counter movements. But the emphasis was on using a stick and a dagger. When I showed that to some people, like my teacher Vince Black or Lotte Sho, who I met years ago, they basically said, well, that's Bagua. And that really intrigued me. I started actually doing Xingyi before Bagua. And what I noticed was, although my Xingyi wasn't very good, people would notice that my stick fighting, my Filipino arts got much more powerful, much more rooted. And so at a certain point I thought, well, what's the key then is to focus more on these internal principles that are unique to any martial art, and we'll develop greater power, greater flexibility, greater skill in that art rather than specific techniques. So at that point I gravitated towards Xingyi, and Xingyi led me to Bagua because they're kind of sister arts. And I think I always kind of had a knack or a drawing towards Bagua simply because it reminded me of the first art I got good at, which was the Filipino arts. I also studied another style of Filipino arts, San Miguel Eskrima under Momoy Cañete. San Miguel is more commonly known as old style Doce Paris because he's one of the brothers who started the famous Doce Paris style. And from Momoy, I really gained an appreciation of someone seeing a man in his 80s with the flesh hanging on his arms, who just used pure skill, technique, timing to achieve his ends in martial arts. And I constantly saw him in the Philippines throw much bigger people around with very little effort. Strikes that seemed like nothing, when he did them on, you felt like being hit with a hammer, even from short distance. And that gave me an appreciation for, in a sense, an internal way of operating, where it's not about external strength, it's not about speed, it's about timing, positioning, and skill. So I think that also fed into my appreciation for Bagua and Xingyi when I encountered them. Bagua, most people think, came out of Taoist circle walking meditation, in which is in many ways similar to what Sufis do with their whirling. So this idea of using the circular stepping in a very particular way, with the twisting of the body and with breathing in this microcosmic orbit where you're inhaling, bringing the qi down to the dantian, letting the qi and breath rise up to the top of the head, and then cycling it down to the dantian, the area below the navel. So the power dynamic in Bagua and the spiraling force that you're trying to create are all predicated on this circle walking practice. And because Bagua developed as a blend of martial arts and Taoist circle walking meditation, the circle walking is still the key component of the art. It allows us to be mobile against an opponent so we can do hit and run tactics. It allows one to flank the opponent by using a curved step, so that in one step you can get to the side of the opponent, which is one of the main tactics in Bagua. And it creates a moving root in that if I meet somebody's arms and I'm going to step in a curved step, I have to step in such a way that they're not going to break my balance and my route while I'm taking their route. So a large portion of the first year to 2 years of training is involved with this emphasis on the moving route and walking circles. The martial arts that went into creating Bagua, most people think it's primarily Lohan boxing because they know that Deng studied that. But in fact, other sources show that he may have studied with many people, and I'm not sure anyone knows what martial arts went into its creation. Clearly, what we can see is strikes and movements and locks and throws that are prevalent in many systems in Chinese martial arts, but they're done in a very different way. Clearly because Bagua developed last of the internal arts and developed really 200 years ago, or actually less than 200 years ago. It's not that old, but yet being the youngest art, it had the advantage of taking from Taiji, Xingyi, even exercises that in Bagua seem to come from the white ape style, Tongbei. And it's clear that practitioners, obviously Sui Jiao, the Chinese wrestling, it's clear that practitioners from Deng Haichuan on have adopted these arts and blended them into the skill sets of Bagua. And my own experience is each practitioner seems to bring whatever they studied before and blend it into this use of the Bagua principles. So the relationship between Bagua and Taoism is clearly, okay, we've talked about the Taoist circle walking, but Bagua claims to use the principles of the I Ching, which is one of the oldest books in the Taoist canon that talks about the principles of constant change and adapting to change. And actually, Bagua is about constant change, constantly moving, circling, changing. One moment being a sitting tiger, the next moment being a soaring dragon, the next moment being a twisting snake, changing body shape, changing body image, changing form, changing posture. When one meets the opponent's hands and he counters a single movement, the immediate thing is to change and change again. And this is congruent with the idea of the I Ching, which uses hexagrams, these broken and solid lines in groups of 6, or trigrams, groups of 3, to show how changing lines represent changes in the world around us, changes in our psyche. Some Bagua practitioners think it's baloney, that Chinese people like to connect the theory with the practice, and in fact they do that after the fact, and so the I Ching connection is an add-on. Some Bagua practitioners think that the real subtleties of Bagua are contained within the I Ching hexagrams. I used to believe, like the first group, that it was kind of baloney and was an add-on. Now more and more I see by studying I Ching that there are principles that are being used, and you can make correspondences with certain body shapes in Bagua and certain hexagrams or trigrams. Okay, internal martial arts, or the Neijia, is a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, the idea that only 3 or 4 arts are Neijia, that just means they developed from the same roots in China. So the Chinese tend to talk about them in terms of Xingyi Bagua Taiji. Some people say Liuhe Ba Fa, which is another Taiji-like art but contains elements of all 3 of the other arts. And some people say Tong Bei Chuan are also internal arts. The idea is that they derive from particularly Taoist meditation, or they take from Taoist meditation, this idea of circulating energy through the body to create internal strength, both for health by strengthening the internal organs, but also to generate explosive power. In Chinese martial arts, Taiji, Xingyi, Bagua are considered the main Neijia, Tongbei and Liuhe Ba Fa maybe also by some, but clearly internal ideas like this are not only Chinese ideas. In the Philippines, I saw people doing similar things, but they don't come out of that Taoist background, so they're not considered Neijia. Obviously, Aiki Jiu-Jitsu people, the founder of Aikido, are doing very similar things to what we're doing in Bagua. But for the Neijia, the Chinese internal arts, what makes them internal is that they don't focus much on external techniques. They focus on body alignment, how to walk, how to breathe, how to stand, and those are the key things that you learn. Everything else is an extrapolation of those. And I have to add that then we come to a division in the internal martial arts world. Some people believe that basically it's just sophisticated body mechanics and breathing. The more strict Taoist people believe that you're actually internally transforming the body to change the way that it operates inside, and that creates the ability to do different things on the outside. I think it is more the internal transformation, because it's the only way you can explain very skinny old men throwing around 250-pound people who are much, much stronger effortlessly. Expanding on the role of breathing and posture, the postures we're holding in Bagua with the head alignment, the shoulders round, etc., the perineum lifting, the feet touching the ground a certain way, it allows these central channels in the body, primarily the Du channel, which runs up the back to the top of the head and into the mouth, and the Ren channel, which in the acupuncture books looks like it runs up, but in internal meditation it's considered to run down inside the body, create this circuit of energy in the body. And the idea with the breathing is that over time, at first you can't let the energy move freely up to the top of the head, usually because there's blockages in the spine to that. And you don't want it to move too quickly because it can create psychic disturbances, but that by slowly walking the circle, in the case of Bagua, with this deep abdominal breathing and ultimately reverse breathing, where you're bringing the energy down to the dantian and up the back of the spine, and then the belly's expanding on the exhale rather than on the inhale, that you're firing up this mechanism in the body that starts to run like an engine on its own. And it's facilitated by The circle walking, because it creates a spiral in the back, and the energy just doesn't flow in a line like this, it actually rolls or spirals up to the top of the head, and then rolls and spirals back down in the center of the body, the dantian. So this is, by doing this kind of practice over time, you store energy in the dantian, and that transforms the way you engage with energy and apply it both for health, but also for spiraling the energy out to transmit it into an opponent. When we talk about energy, it's really, for the Chinese, it's qi, which does not translate as energy. Qi and breath are one thing. So if the breath moves like that, the qi moves like that, and everybody can feel the breath move like that. The key is, can it do it on an unconscious level all the time without thought? And that takes years of practice doing this practice. And then you don't have to think about it. You don't have to focus on it. It's just moving like that all the time. For myself, because I'm not a professional fighter, I apply it much more in the medical field than I do, except when I'm teaching martial arts, on a daily basis. But in medicine, we're using that all the time in palpating a patient's body, in putting needles in, you're transmitting force into them through the needle. In massage and bone setting, you're transmitting force in that way with this connected body, with the breath, the qi moving through the body and trying to transmit it out into the patient.